What's up, everybody? Welcome to another week here on Orange Bloods Live. It's time for the Overreaction Monday show. Jeff Ketchum, Anwar Richardson, joining you as we always do on Mondays. Brought to you by the amazing people at RogueShop.com. Use that promo code OrangeBloods for Texas's home for legal CBD, THC, and so much more. They've got pet products, pain, anxiety, sleeplessness. You just want to feel good. A little bit of everything you can find at Rogue Shop. Just reach out. Go to the website, hop in the chat. Shar will be there to answer any questions that you have. They bleed orange. They care about Texas football. And if you're going to be buying product, why not keep it in the family? Get great product, great customer service, and keep it all in the Longhorn family. Mr. Richardson, quite a weekend we had over the weekend. Longhorns beat Florida by a bazillion, as I think we all felt like the 21-point spread that Vegas put out early last week was way too low. That proved to be an understatement of sorts. OU probably isn't going to a bowl game after the weekend in one of it was very Cal beating Texas almost a decade ago on a missed extra point. It kind of felt a little bit like that, where you really are stealing defeat, maybe not from the jaws of victory, but from something close to it. So Georgia loses. Alabama dusts LSU in their crib. Suddenly the pathway to the SEC championship game is wide open. There's a lot of stuff for us to get into today.
Man, yeah. I mean, it's been, it was, to your point, a great weekend catch of college football. You know, it's interesting when you talk about, Oklahoma. There's always that, people always say good teams find a way to win, but I always say the opposite is true. Bad teams always find a way to lose. And that's just kind of like the Oklahoma thing for me. It's interesting too, Catch, as I was kind of going through, and I was thinking about this morning on my walk. When I see, Alabama, obviously with a good quality win, and I wonder. One of the things I was wondering, kind of just added to the conversation, is does Texas need to win an SEC championship in order to really get? I mean, you need to solidify one of those top four spots. But I just wonder, when they start doing the seedings, if Texas is not in the top four and the year's over, and then kind of look at how many ranked teams that are standing at the end of the season. Maybe not when they played them, but at the end of the season, there may be one ranked team that Texas has defeated when we get to the end of the year. That would potentially be Texas A&M. So I think like them doing what they're doing against some of these teams and maybe dominating them will help them with the committee and that also subjective eye test thing. That they got to make sure they quote unquote pass the eye test, but it is definitely, I mean, it's great. It was a fun weekend. It's fun to watch, all these things. Alabama beating the hell out of LSU. Did not expect that at all. I thought South Carolina would beat Vanderbilt. And I know Diego Pavia is a little banged up, but South Carolina catches one of these sneaky teams that, you're effing around and finding out, like they've got a good claim as far as everything is concerned, as far as like, okay, maybe where they should be ranked. And then, the last one, of course, is Ole Miss really helping out Texas by doing the dirty work for them and knocking off Georgia, because that really opens up the door for Texas as far as making the SEC championship game.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I think let's start with the Texas part, because I think this is really important. I think what happens to Georgia this week, and we still need to see what the playoff committee does. Where does Georgia sit? Because when you look at what happened to them in Miami this weekend, a loss meant in one poll, Georgia fell 9 spots. And in another poll, I think they fell 8. I'd have to go back and look, but they fell because what happened when it was over with, voters were looking, and we'll see this when we do our SEC power rankings this week.
Yeah.
when they've got 2 losses and suddenly there's a pile of teams with 2 losses, you find yourself saying, well, you can't put them behind Ole Miss because that just happened. So they got to be behind Ole Miss, but where do I have Ole Miss? And then you've got the Alabama piece of the equation. And now Alabama has 2 losses, but they also beat Georgia. So Georgia didn't just have a tumble. They had a tumble where there was the committee's got to really reconcile with the resumes at some point. Texas, as long as it has 1 loss, is an eyeball test team. They'll be number 3 in the rankings this week, but their resume isn't nearly as good as the teams below it. But if they lose, then they probably put themselves into a position where there's a pile of 2 lost teams. And I don't think the eyeball test will work as much. I do think counting your good wins and looking at who you've lost will matter. And so I think Texas is clearly home free if they make it to the SEC championship game. The committee's told us they're not going to punish any of those teams that make it to the championship game by putting them behind teams that didn't make it. So if Texas goes 11-1, loses, let's say, to Alabama in the SEC championship game, I do believe they would be somewhere between 5 and 8. But if they lose to Texas A&M, I think they will get in, but I think we're talking about a 10 and 11, something like that. Yeah. Because there will be teams with the same number of losses that will simply have better resumes. And I think the closer we get to Selection Day, the less easy it is for the committee to go, well, just look at them. I mean, forget about the resume. They're pretty on the eye. You've got to be able to make a case that goes beyond something as subjective as we just think they're better. So it'll be interesting to see how this thing goes. You know, the good news is Texas emerges from the weekend exactly the way it needed to. I said it all week long. The only thing that mattered was Quinn Ewers plays well and the conversation around him dies down. Yeah. And it's exactly what happened. He had his best statistical game of his entire career. I mean, it's not even close. He's only had a couple of games in his career where he's at a 200-plus quarterback rating. This was 230-plus. It was the kind of thing that for the rest of the season, if you can bottle it up and drink from that well every single week, Texas will be a really difficult out. We'll go into the Fayetteville game this weekend, Arkansas in Fayetteville, and I don't think the conversation will be about Quinn the way that it has been for the last month. So I almost don't care about anything else that happened in the Florida game. Quinn comes out of that getting his mojo back a little bit, and I think it's exactly what Texas needed before it goes into this 3-game stretch. I really believe will define how we remember this season. You can't lose at Arkansas. You really can't lose at Texas A&M. Otherwise, I think you've lost an incredible opportunity. Texas is on the cusp in year number 1 in the SEC of playing for an SEC championship. I watched the Texas women's soccer team yesterday win the first SEC championship for the University of Texas. And it was like, whoa, look at the women, man. They went in there and won it in year 1. How badass are they?
Badass.
And they won one in extra time, and then they won the other one 10 minutes before time expired. Like, it was actually pretty thrilling stuff, but there's a little something extra to it. I found myself wondering, was that the greatest goal in the history of Texas soccer, considering it won a championship first year in the SEC? And then I started thinking about, geez, this is the way I'm thinking about the women's soccer program. Imagine if the football program in year 1 is able to claim a championship after everything that was said. So we're here. The Florida game, I think, is the last of this season where there was not going to be any jeopardy for Texas. Florida never had a chance to make that thing competitive. It feels like it will be different this weekend at Arkansas. We know it will be different at the end of the season in College Station. And I think even that game against Kentucky could be more competitive than the Florida game, but it's really about what happens on the road in 2 of the last 3 weeks.
Well, 100%. And look, you're going to, I agree with you 100%. And you're going to hear, couple of things, right? We'll see what Arkansas looks like. We'll have to be monitoring the injury report this week, right? With Taylor Green, their quarterback. He's got this knee injury, but if he's able to come back, that Arkansas offense looks a little bit different. And look, Catch, at the end of the day, we're going to hear Sark on Monday when he goes there at his press conference. He's going to talk about a team that beat Tennessee this year. You know, that Tennessee does have a loss against them, 19-14. So he's going to talk them up. And I think
he should.
Yes. And it's easy to get caught up in the, they lost to Ole Miss. They got blown out by an Ole Miss, right? Or they lost to LSU. But we know that this team has the ability to potentially turn it on when they need to turn it on. They have a close loss against Oklahoma State to start off the year, close loss against A&M. Not a bad team. This is one of those, as again, Catch, I was thinking, again, Texas has played one good team that we would say this year, which was Georgia. They faced another team that had a pulse, which was Vanderbilt, right? And again, not saying good. I'm putting Georgia here. I'm not having the Vanderbilt debate this week, Catch, but I'm putting Vanderbilt here. And everybody else pretty much has been below. Michigan's 5-5 at this point. Everybody else, you just kind of show Oklahoma, which we'll get to. They just are not good this year. I don't know how when that turns around for them. And so now we're starting to go to kind of the last portion of it. Kentucky has no offense, but Arkansas is one of those, good team, goodish teams, team of a pulse. I'll make Georgia good. So a team of a pulse along the Vanderbilt line where you're going to have to go on the road. Me and my PTSD, even though it's going to be a daytime game, still have to go on the road and really win 2 out of 3 on the road, Catch. But to your point, you get past the Arkansas game, should be able to beat Kentucky. Then at that point, whatever happens in A&M probably doesn't keep you out of the playoffs. Like even if you did lose, it may keep you out of the SEC championship game. It won't keep you out of the playoffs more than likely. But yet, to your point, Arkansas is going to be a good team. Sark's going to talk them up and talk about how good they are and talk about all the good things that they do and Coach Pittman and how well they're coached and so on and so forth. So you're right. Florida was the last kind of gimme kind of team. And then this is where another real true test comes in.
Barb's 10, we'll let him lead us off in super chats. We've got a few to knock out. Isn't ranking teams early, then docking them for SOS later the definition of hindsight? Well, to answer that first part, I wouldn't quite look at it like that. It's actually the definition of now sight.
Yeah.
It's not hindsight, it's now sight. We're looking at what those teams are now, and it defines how good those wins are. Sorry, but you can say that Michigan was ranked 10. Historically, it will be remembered. You get to claim that you went on a road and beat a top 10 team on the road. But at the end of the season, we get to look at how things turned out and go, look, Anwar and I, when we played fantasy football, we would do our drafts, and the day we do the drafts, we like our teams. Mm-hmm. That looks like a top 10 team. And at the end of the season, if you go 6-10,
yeah,
it wasn't a good draft.
No. And the thing is, I mean, like at the end of the day, we look at Missouri and we're like, everyone thought that was a top 10 team, right? And you're like, they're not that good, right?
Some of the worst Texas teams in history started this season ranked really highly.
Catch, I remember, I think it was 2016, Texas beats a ranked Notre Dame team at home. They were a top 10 team, top 5, whatever they were. And you're like, holy crap, they beat Notre Dame. Like, this thing is going to be amazing. Notre Dame doesn't go to a bowl game. Texas doesn't go to a bowl game. Charlie Strong gets fired. Like, at some point, it didn't mean anything.
The one that will stick out forever for me is 1997. Texas was number 11 in the country, and UCLA was unranked. And UCLA beat Texas 66-3.
Oh, shoot.
Remember it as Route 66, Anwar.
Woo.
But at the end of the season, Texas was 4-7, and John Malkovich lost his job.
Yeah.
And it's like, do we remember that at the beginning of the year they were 11th? Does that have any value at all? Mm-hmm. Or at the end of the year, do we go, they sucked?
Yeah.
I feel you. I feel you, Barbs.
Catch, it's the same thing. I went into that game with Arkansas a few years ago. And at the end of the day, Arkansas actually ended up being a much better team than most people thought. And that ended up being a good win for Arkansas. So yeah, I get where Barbs is at, but the thing that Ketch and I were going back and forth last week. You have to rank, for me. You got to rank them where they are now, and you can't worry about where it was back in August and the beginning of September.
And look, I get. Here's the thing, because I retweeted somebody earlier today on Twitter. I thought, look. Texas scheduled the defending national champions, which, oh, by the way, got moved around for TV purposes so that the whole SEC thing could happen. So they volunteered to go on the road at Michigan this year, on the road at Ohio State, and they've done themselves no favors. They schedule the defending national champions on the road. Mm-hmm. And they go into the conference that everybody is telling them is the most difficult conference in America. It's not Texas's fault that everybody went to shit. They can't control that Michigan's 5-5. But at the end of the year, what you can't do if you're a Texas fan, you can't bow up to other fans of other fan bases and we beat Michigan. You just can't. They were number 10 at the time, right? But they're 5-5. So. Yeah. But if you're Texas, just keep winning games. The community loves Texas.
I mean, Oklahoma was ranked at the time as well.
Well, yeah, then there's that. Our guy Ruben jumps in for $5. Thank you, Ruben. A natty would be dope, but as a Texas fan, I think winning the SEC in year one would be the better trophy for this year. What say you? Ruben, you're crazy.
Ruben. Okay. For some of us use rogue products for recreational use, right? Ruben, I don't know what you're using, and I'm just joking with you, Ruben. There's not a Texas fan in the world who will tell you, you know what, we can have that natty, but boy, I'd much rather have that SEC championship trophy. Come on, man. Like, no, Ruben. Like, nothing but love for you, brother. But you come on, Ruben. Don't do that.
I feel Ruben. I get what he's saying because he's not wrong. The SEC in year one would be incredibly dope. But here's what I would say, Ruben. It was dope in 1996 when Texas won the Big 12 in year one in one of the truly great all-time Texas games. The 37-27 against Nebraska. But you know what? They do not retire numbers at the University of Texas for winning conference championships.
No.
It barely gets remembered all these years later. It's just in a pile of I was there this weekend at DKR. You look at it, and it's just a list of numbers, and there's like 20 of them, and it doesn't stand out from the pack at all. National championship stands out so much more. So while I feel we got to be realistic about this. I'll almost sign off on anything, right? I'll sign off on winning the SEC, but losing the bowl game by 100 points would be worth it. I get that. I do. But we're not going to say that anything's better than winning the national championship. Ruben, you got to be with us on this. Don't say that around anybody. They'll think you're the crazy person.
Yeah. And here's the thing, Catch. I disagree. Here's where I disagree a little bit with Sark. Because I understand with Sark, he'll tell us about how important winning the conference championship is. And it's cool. Like, I think it's cool. But you and I've had this conversation before. Ultimately, what you're going to be remembered for is what you do in the playoffs. Like that's ultimately what's going to happen. And ultimately, this is going to look like if I'm like, hey, Catch, 3 years ago, who was the AFC South champion?
Exactly.
You're going to say, I don't know. Hey, Catch, 3 years ago, who played in the Super Bowl? Who was with, that's what you're going to remember. That everything else is cool, but it's going to be like, hey, who won 4 years ago? Who won the AFC West? Like, dude, I don't know.
I think it's bigger than that, but it's not much bigger. To me, it's a little bit like, the thing is, as college football moves more and more to pro sports, maybe you're more right than wrong. It just feels like in the NFL, a division championship's not worth anything.
Not really.
It used to be. But now it really just, and I don't know if it's because the playoffs have been expanded. I don't know exactly what it is, but maybe it was the first time a wild card team won a Super Bowl. And then you were just like, oh, so it really just doesn't matter at all.
You see the Giants roll through and beat New England. That you're like, well, let
me tell you what it's really like. It's like having the best record in the conference and getting home field advantage. So it's better than winning the division. It's like winning home field advantage. And because there have been Cowboy teams that have done that over the last 30 years, not many of them, but a couple. And you'll remember that, but then ultimately it's like, but they sucked in the playoffs. And then you just kind of move on. Yeah. We got another super chat I wanted to hit up real quick, unless there's more that I've missed. Mark says, Cook replied, talking about Jonte Cook, to an Instagram comment with a hook 'em and then a thumbs down, so F him. Mark, look, I'm going to speak for Anwar on this because we are almost always unified on stuff like this. Stay out of these kids' comments on the Instagram and the social media stuff. Like, that's a 19, 20-year-old dude who's in his feelings right now. Yeah, you got to let him have that. Like, he's a kid. He's a kid. And, like, you just don't be that person that's, like, getting upset because you saw someone comment something. And there are extenuating circumstances that I would allow. Oh, he said that? But like a thumbs down on a hook 'em with some emojis. Don't get mad at emojis because you need to reserve and retain your sanity for things that really matter. And like, we got to just let Jonte Cook go off, try to live his life, find his next school. Texas is okay. Texas is the person in the relationship during the breakup that already has stuff lined up. Oh, well, we broke up, but I'm going out on a date with Elle McPherson tonight or Barry or whomever, right? That felt like old man examples. Pick whoever you want. They're lined up. They're good. They're not even looking back. Let the bitter, upset person just sort through the stages of grief. Let that man grieve a little bit. That's all I got to say.
Got nothing else to add.
I knew we would be aligned on that.
Yeah.
There are a few things in life that you and I are 1,000% aligned on, but the social media mentions and what 19 and 20-year-olds do
does not move my needle.
Anwar and I aren't old, but we're already clear that for all intents and purposes, we're old. So
No, I'm good. I'm not learning any new dances. Like I don't need to necessarily know what gorilla is singing or rapping about. I'm good. Like I'm good where I'm at in life. Let them have their thing. Unless it's something that a guy gets arrested.
I never even try to decode emojis. Just
oh God.
Because you know what? When I saw that, you know what my thought was? He's doing a hook 'em horn and an upside down gig 'em. That's about as pro of a Texas tweet or comment. Seriously, the first time I looked at it, I was like, hook 'em and an upside down gig 'em. What's the big deal? And who knows? Mm-hmm. You don't know that he meant that because you're not in the mind of a 19-year-old, unless I apologize if you're 19 years old and you speak 19-year-olds, but nevertheless. All right, look, we're caught up. See, hey, Sandman, look,
Yeah.
clarity and self-awareness means a lot in this world. And now we all have a little bit. We have no more super chats. I have an OU hot take. And I want to say for the record that I predicted OU to pretty much be terrible this season for months. I had them at 7-5, but I said I thought 6-6 was a real possibility. And lo and behold, really, unless they go on the road in Baton Rouge and win that game to end the season, they're going to be 5-7 and miss a bowl. They're going to miss a bowl game. They got Alabama, and they have LSU on the road, and those are their huckleberries. That's what they have left to deal with. I don't think Oklahoma's recovering. I think we are witnessing the end of Oklahoma as a major national college football brand. Maybe the brand will stick because Nebraska still has the brand. But I think there was always a risk, Anwar, with Texas and Oklahoma going into the SEC together. Feels like one of those deals where the room's not big enough for two people. The town's not big enough for two people. It felt like one of those two would come in and immediately sit with the cool kids, and that the other one wouldn't. And look, it was fair to wonder when the announcement was made, is Texas low-key hurting themselves for a long, long time because they went into this conference? I mean, Texas doesn't want to be Texas A&M. That's not what they aspire to be. But could you unintentionally make yourself some version of that? I look at Oklahoma right now. They're going to give Venables another year. From a talent standpoint, I think this is as good as it gets for Oklahoma. I think we will, starting next season, recruiting will tank. Venables is going to lose his job, but they're going to keep him for another year. They're going to make the Shaka Smart mistake. And you always say, what did Jeremy Foley say? It's one of the all-time great lines, because as soon as you said it for the first time and I heard it, and I think a lot of people that read Orange Bloods, it's one of the things that we've always remembered. It's like, oh my God, what a great piece of life advice.
Life
advice. Yes. It's like, Jeremy Foley, I've used that 5,000 times since I've heard it.
Yes.
Things that must eventually be done. What is it? Eventually?
Things that must be done inevitably should be done immediately.
Yes. And Oklahoma's not going to do that. And I think we all understand why. They literally just gave the guy an extension. But that program has one chance. They've got to hit it out of the park on a quarterback transfer this offseason. And they don't even know who their offensive coordinator is going to be yet, or else. And I don't know how much that's even going to matter. They got Dylan Gabriel, and that didn't completely work. I think Oklahoma's talent level is going to start to decline, and they are just, until I see something that completely changes it, I think they are foreseeably, for the rest of this decade, SEC riffraff.
Well, here's why I would not disagree with you, Catch, is that they're not in the Big 12 anymore.
Simple as that.
And so, right, you're in a conference right now where we've seen, like, Lane Kiffin struggled for several years until now he's got that thing going, but he's Lane Kiffin. We know what he can do, right? Kalen DeBoer is in this conference now, right? And he's got Alabama going, and they've got, I love the Duncanville quarterback that they've got coming in. I don't know where he's ranked on your Lone Star rankings, but
high.
I love him. I loved him. You've got Sark, who's in here as well, right? And so you've got at least certain teams that you say to yourself, they should be that there in the rankings. You're still going to have Kirby Smart, right? He's here year in and year out, right? Elko has put together a better season at A&M than I was probably anticipating, Catch. That's just them right there. We haven't even gotten into the conversation of a Beamer and what he's doing there in South Carolina and how good that program is. And now we look back and say to ourselves, man, a couple of games here and there, the conversation about South Carolina may be different. They're in a conference where they got some hellified coaches. And, in Oklahoma, essentially is bringing, a knife to a gunfight because they don't have a coach who is as good as the guys that I just mentioned. And to your point, if anybody knows what spiraling downhill looks like, we can tell you.
Amen.
We can tell you, brother. We have read this book. We have read it from front to cover. We got the soundtrack. We got the coffee mugs. We've got the souvenir T-shirts. We got it all. We can tell you what it looks like with Charlie Strong. And if you try to hold on and think things are going to get better, how it won't. We can tell you what it looks like on Tom Herman. But here's the deal. You always had an opportunity and a chance in the Big 12. In the SEC, you bring this there, good luck. Good luck.
And it's your whole how many 5 stars does it take to beat TCU?
Yeah.
And in the Big 12, that is such a fair statement. In the SEC, it does take a few. And I think
it takes a lot.
The thing that Steve Sarkisian won't get enough credit for is that the amount of elite level recruiting talent that he brought in, both, I think, through the portal, because they've nailed the portal a couple of years in a row in some real critical areas. I don't think they win the Big 12 championship without Adonai Mitchell. I don't think they're the best team that they can be with Isaiah Bond. So, talent really matters. But they've elevated the talent to a point where they've got one of the best rosters in America, and it's needed. And the problem that Oklahoma will have is when I say they'll be off in the wilderness to a certain extent, I think it can get them, on their good years, they can win 8 or 9 games. But I don't know that there's a level beyond. I don't know. One of the things they're going to have to do is stop hiring assistant coaches. I know that's been their MO forever. I know that Bob Stoops was an assistant at Florida. I was pleading for John Mackovic. I referenced the 1997 season, pleaded for John Mackovic to hire Bob Stoops in the offseason of 1997 when he was given a blank check to go hire any defensive coordinator in America. I get it. Lincoln Riley, we get it, right? But Brent Venables was a mistake that could have been avoided. No head coaching experience. Sometimes these elite defensive coordinators are assistant coaches. That's who they are. And to try to do more than that, it's a bad hire. We've seen that happen at Texas. They have to nail the next head coaching situation. And I'm fascinated to see who they would look to. It's not their MO to go out and make a Brian Kelly kind of hire. Who would move to Oklahoma? And is that guy a rock star? Because I think that's the other elephant in the room that Texas fans really can really appreciate. In the SEC, you got to have a rock star, man. And Steve Sarkisian's a rock star. Now, it's too early to know what type of band this Texas football program long-term is going to be under Sarkisian. Is it Aerosmith or is it, something less than that? Are they Journey, right? No.
I like it.
I like Journey, by the way, but I'm just saying, we wouldn't necessarily put them on Mount Rushmore. Tom Herman was very good, but not elite, not great. Charlie Strong had been very good at Louisville, but these types of jobs reveal what coaches really are. And I think the LSU job is somewhat revealing who Brian Kelly is. It is hard work in the SEC, and Texas will have tougher years than this one. I think we all understand that there will be years where they've got Alabama and Ole Miss and Tennessee on the schedule, and A&M and Oklahoma and a Notre Dame potentially. There will be seasons when it doesn't quite go like this, which is why you have to have an elite roster. And I don't know that we're going to see OU with an elite roster for a long, long time, if ever again.
So is OU like your Jimmy Buffett? Just like one song that everyone liked
No,
and that's it?
Look, you know what? Let me tell you what. OU, all those championships, all that history, they're like a band they're the Beach Boys.
Mm.
Everybody can appreciate everything that they did in the past. But they're not making music today that anybody's listening to. And when they show up and do a concert, and I've been to a Beach Boys show, you play the hits. You play your old hits. Oklahoma's going to be talking about the Big 12 for decades. Oh, we were in the Big 12. We ran that shit. Well, yeah, you did. You did. You were the king of a small block. And now you're on the biggest block. And I just think we stress this with Sarkisian. It needs to be said. This is exactly when it started slow for Sarkisian. One of the things we said was you can't go into the SEC taking on water. You can't. And the decision leaders at Texas would have needed to be very mindful of if Sarkisian wasn't working out. You can't have no momentum. You can't just be a complete dud, because I think you can take on water in this conference really quickly. And then there's just so many good teams you've got to climb over. South Carolina is a perfect example, Anwar. They're really good. I think at their best, they're one of the best 12 teams in America. And I have thought that for a number of weeks now. And I picked them to beat A&M for a reason. And I knew that they would stomp on Vanderbilt. But they've got 3 losses. Mm-hmm. And part of that was they took it on the chin. They lost an overtime game to LSU that they probably should have won, that I thought the officials kind of took away from them.
They got screwed.
They did. The ball that got caught inside the 5-yard line that shouldn't have counted. Like, they got legitimately screwed. And that's going to happen some years. It's why we'll do a power poll. And South Carolina, I think last week in our poll was like 8th or 9th.
Yeah.
But it's hard because it's like, well, are they better than Alabama? Are they better than Ole Miss, Tennessee, Texas, Georgia? You start doing the names out loud, and you're like, well, those teams aren't great, but I can't rank South Carolina ahead of them. Yeah. There's just a lot of teams like that. We're talking about a league this year where there's still a possibility that there could be a 7 or 8 team tie with 2 losses.
Yeah.
So if you're not one of those teams that's in that group, the drop-off will probably go like 1 team with 1 loss, 7 teams with 2 loss, and then there's going to be a drop-down where a bunch of 4 and 5 loss teams start to come into play. And the thing is, Oklahoma to the naked eye looks every bit as bad as Texas looks to the naked eye. They have no quarterback. Their skill players suck.
They've scored, you know what, Catch? They have scored 91 points this season. Texas has only given up 87. I mean, so they literally, I think, Texas has scored 160 points. Oklahoma has scored. Georgia scored 193 points this season. Oklahoma has scored 91.
I got to look up the scoring. Now that you've said that, I've got to go to scoring offense.
Go to scoring offense. South Carolina has scored 199 points this season. Oklahoma has scored 91. Like 100 plus more. Go to scoring offenses to see it. When you say how bad they are at the skill position, like, it's bad.
Do you know? Okay, Oklahoma is not in the worst in the bottom 33 that I can see. But let me look at these teams. Let me just, out of just blind curiosity.
Okay.
Florida State.
Oh my God. It's about a difference a year makes.
Hey,
Golly.
I think you're talking about SEC numbers.
Yeah, I'm talking SEC. I'm not talking
Right.
nationally.
I
You
looked
went
up in that, but Florida State is 133 in the country offensively. Kentucky, 124.
They're
So they'll be coming to town in a couple of weeks, and there's no jeopardy there when Texas plays that game. As good as Kentucky is on defense, and I actually think they allow less than 18.9 points per game. What a weird team. Michigan is 118 in the country. And Oklahoma, probably because they played Temple early in the season, it skews their numbers a little bit. But yeah. By the way, it's 9:41. Can I 2 minutes have a Liverpool soccer conversation with an Arsenal fan?
Sure.
There's an official in the Premier League that Liverpool fans effing loathe. We've been complaining for years about how terrible this guy is and that he's got a bias against Liverpool and his background as a Manchester United stadium. Like, there's been all these signs that say this guy shouldn't be working. Even this weekend, he didn't give Mo Salah a foul when he was dragged down and probably what should have been a red card, right? So a video comes out today, and it's this official on camera calling Jurgen Klopp, Liverpool's old manager, a cunt.
Oh, wow.
Multiple times. And the guy on the camera that's doing the recording is talking about how much they hate people from Liverpool.
Oh, wow.
He's been suspended from his job. And I don't know that the birth of my children made me as happy as knowing that this may be the end of that son of a bitch's career.
Cody. Look, David Cody is his name.
David Coote.
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 Excuse me. I thought it was Cote. Coote. Okay.
If you were to go back and see in retrospect all of the bad decisions, he cost Liverpool a title. Onward, there was a game where Manchester City and Everton are playing, and Rodrigo has his arm out like this, and the ball hits the arm.
Wow.
And he waves it off, doesn't give the penalty. Liverpool lost the title by a point. If Everton had been given the penalty, the title flips that year. Okay.
Rant over.
Now
you know how Texas fans felt about the Big 12 without the proof.
It'd be like if the Kevin Marr guy had a video that came out and was like, fucking hate Texas, man. You know what I think about Steve Sarkisian? I can't say the word. But now the thing to acknowledge, the only thing that I will give him a little grief on, or like backing on, is that in the UK, they say the C word like we say damn and hell. It's coming out of their mouth like every 5 seconds. So it's not quite the same as when it's said here. There's no word in the UK that you can't say just outright. It's amazing. I kind of wish I lived there, not because I want to say the word, but how nice must it be to just be able to say anything and everybody just is like, yeah, well, that's how we talk.
I wish I would have known the specific word before I sent that article to Max 30 seconds ago. Because I just think I taught my 11-year-old a new cuss word.
Oh, yeah, it's said like 10 times in the video.
Yeah, it's okay.
Am I going full Luch today because of my Liverpool soccer? Look, here's what you guys need to understand. Imagine an NFL referee. Imagine an NFL referee got caught on tape talking about a team and a city and a coach, and then you went back and looked at it would be a massive scandal. Massive. I've been trying all day to imagine in my head, what's the equivalent of that? An NBA referee cursing, like calling LeBron something completely out of bounds, and then realizing that guy's called a bunch of finals games, and then oh my God, he didn't call this, and it's like being it's onwards being a conspiracy theorist, and then your theory being proven.
Yeah, that's true.
And you're like, I told you that 9/11 was an inside job. It's like, anyway,
So let me ask you this. All right, let's go back to OU for a second. What do you think this looks like if Lincoln Riley doesn't punk out and doesn't get scared of the SEC and says, you know what, I'm going to stay here and compete? We're having a different conversation about that.
Because I think he would turn Jackson Arnold into a good player. One of the things that you do when you hire a coordinator is you're asking him to know how to make good hires. That guy made a bad offensive hire. And just like when Sean Watson was hired, and I don't mean for Sean Watson to catch a stray today, but when that happened, there were Texas fans that maybe didn't even want to admit it. They didn't want to say, well, this is going to be a disaster. But they thought it. They were like, who wanted Sean Watson? Who were we fighting it out for? And this is Oklahoma's problem again. When they gave the extension to Venables in this offseason, why? Who were you bidding against? Who were you bidding against? And it's not that Texas hasn't made similar mistakes. We've seen them make it. They made it with Tom Herman. But timing is everything in life. Texas made that hire or that bad decision ultimately. Even if he wasn't a bad coach, he wasn't a great coach. They were able to clean that out and get the right guy in, which you couldn't have completely have foreseen when the hire was made. You couldn't have completely known that Sarkisian would be able to accelerate what Texas needed accelerated as quickly as he did.
So here's my question to you. As I was thinking, Catch, Oklahoma, will they have a bigger fall off than Nebraska, UCLA?
It'll never be that bad, but
okay.
They'll be the constant Texas Tech of the SEC. In their good years, in their absolute peak year, if the schedule breaks right and they have a great quarterback, they can win 10 games. But year in and year out, we're talking about a team that's going to win 9 at a peak. They'll most likely be in the 7 or 8 range. And you know who they'll be? They'll be Auburn. They'll be Auburn. They'll fire coaches after 3 years because those coaches aren't winning more than 7 or 8 games. And then they'll hire another coach and they'll win 7 or 8 games. And in a great year moving forward, Oklahoma can go 10-2. But they'll have to have an amazing quarterback, a favorable schedule, and a head coach who's not a screw up. And Venables is a screw up. They like him at Oklahoma. I read somewhere this weekend where it was like, he may be the most honorable man in college football. Oh, so stop. He's not the prince who was promised. He's a good assistant coach with a nice personality. It's almost all of them. They do recruit for a living. Most coaches in college football are more charming than Arnold the Pig in Green Acres. A little Pulp Fiction there. Shout out there, Anwar.
It's pretty good.
They can usually charm a room. That's how they get the job more times than not in the first place. So surprise, Brent Venables, it can be charming. But he's not special. And look, Lincoln Riley, as it turns out, isn't special. And maybe the elephant in the room, Anwar, I talk about this all the time in the NFL, but it's really true in college football except for the greats. it's a very serendipitous thing for a program when it all comes together and it starts winning at an elite level. Think Jimmy Johnson with the Dallas Cowboys. When he goes to the Miami Dolphins, he didn't start sucking as a head coach. But the dynamics are different. It's hard to be elite of the elite multiple times in your life. And I think that, that's the tricky thing about a guy like Lincoln Riley is he had it cooking at Oklahoma, was a notch below elite of the elite from a NCAA program standpoint. And he goes somewhere else, and it's really hard to replicate what was established at Oklahoma and what, quite frankly, Bob Stoops had a big role in getting lined up for Lincoln Riley when he took over.
Yeah.
And so if you're Lincoln Riley and you're not following, as it turns out, one of the truly great coaches of the 21st century and Bob Stoops, Lincoln needs to, everybody always says, don't follow the all-time great coach, follow the coach who follows the all-time great coach. As it turns out, Lincoln Riley needed to follow the all-time great coach. He inherited an infrastructure that was pretty badass and won some championships, had put Baker Mayfield there for him. And then everything that follows.
But creating it from scratch is hard because again, to use Charlie Strong, he was fine at Louisville, and then he had to come here and kind of quote unquote create it from scratch and can do it. He probably wins more championships at Louisville if he stays there. He's 100. Running that conference. He is. And he comes here, couldn't do it. And to your point, likable. Charlie was incredibly likable. The administration loved Charlie, loved him. All the people that we spoke to, they did not want to fire Charlie. They literally said, dude, all you got to do is just beat Kansas and you'll come back for next year. Like, it was set up to all you have to do is just beat the worst team, just get bowl eligible. You're good, man. It took that for them to say, okay. Well, I also, Anwar, think that the finances of college football, it's going to be, it's starting this season, really. And you're starting, like, I think I heard Joey Galloway say this about Miami. If it wasn't Joey, I apologize. It's not that big of a deal. But somebody mentioned it was a $20 million team. That the cost of doing business in college football is expensive. And it won't just be internally this $20 million that's being set. Like, it's going to end up being about a $40 or $50 million enterprise per year to pay a roster when it's all said and done, because that's just where we're headed. So knowing a lot of these schools, including Oklahoma, because I know Texas is having a hard time right now. Before this NCAA lawsuit, Texas having to crank out $20 million annually. That means during a recruit's 4-year career, a Texas player, that the school will spend $80 million at a minimum over 4 years on talent. When you have a coach who's got a massive buyout, at some point, there's just not enough money. At some point, we got to pay $40 million for a buyout. Okay, I hear you, but you're also telling me we need $20 million. At some point, it's just too much. And I think Oklahoma's in a position where the best thing for their football program would be to cut their losses with Brent Venables this season. Period. But you got to the tricky thing is sticking the landing on a hire is almost impossible. It kind of reminds me of Texas's quarterbacks, Anwar, from 1994 through 2009. They go James Brown, Major Applewhite, Chris Sims, Vince Young, Colt McCoy. Mm-hmm. That's half a generation of life. Yeah. And it's like, boy, it sure is nice when you just have great quarterback play every season.
You have a guy who's an all-time great player all the time. Oklahoma, for years, have nailed the football coach hire, which means eventually, and that's not easy. To get the right hire is what, 1 out of 10? There's a 10% chance he hires somebody who's going to be elite. It's a 90% chance that you're going to hire something far less than that. Tom Herman's a perfect example. He did a good job at Texas. He wasn't doing a great job at Texas, but great is really hard to find. If it was easy, everybody would do it. So Oklahoma is finding that out with Venables. The math doesn't get easier when you have to do it again. And I'm curious to see. I'm really, considering that they always hire assistant coaches, I'm curious to see what a head coaching market would look like for them. And if you were to get a guy like Shane Beamer, does that automatically work the way you think it works? I mean, is he just a slightly better version than Brent Venables? Do we think he's special, or do we think he does a really good job? Yeah. I don't know. It's hard to. I think, like I said, I think Oklahoma, barring the hire of the 21st century's in for a world of hurt, at least for the rest of the decade, they'll have to thread the needle significantly. Just unbelievably, I think, to find themselves in the playoff hunt the rest of the decade.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I mean, Catch, it's not going to be easy, on the, like you said, to find the next person. Like, because even if you want to bring Beamer back, right, which would make total sense, you don't have to money whip him. I mean, Beamer he ain't gonna leave South Carolina just because he wants to help you out. Like, he's gonna do it because you would have to pay him. You would have to pay him what you weren't really willing to pay Lincoln Riley, which would be talking about going full circle at that point, But you're gonna have to pay him a whole lot of money. But I don't know how they get back in because, Catch, if you get a 5-star quarterback and you don't know what to do with him and you don't know how to develop him, you can cancel Christmas on getting another one anytime soon. And we'll see what happens with Jackson Arnold after this season. He gets to play, but his red shirt is burned. That didn't go according to the plan. And then you're gonna have they'll go in, they'll have maybe a decent recruiting class. They'll talk themselves up as far as the transfer portal is concerned, blah, blah, blah. They'll get a new OC, and we know what it's like. You'll tell yourself we're good, but you're not. You're not going to be good in this conference like that. Like,
would Josh Heupel leave Tennessee to go home? Because he's got that thing
going.
It's so hard to get a program where he has it now.
Yes.
And Tennessee is so committed in NIL. They've basically said, hey, if we can't beat Alabama one way, we'll do it another. They're just like Ole Miss. Tennessee is in we will pay these kids whatever they want. Just bring the talent.
Once you get that machine going, it's really hard to say, I'm going to leave what I started for something else. It takes a Lincoln Riley saying, yeah, I've got this thing going, but I'll go to USC because they money with me. And I ain't telling them no.
And he has to be a little bit of a cautionary tale.
Yes.
Dude, make all your money and don't walk away from your equity. It's like owning a house for 20 years and then just donating it to charity. Like, you stayed there. You paid on the house. It's yours. You have property.
Yeah. They're going to have to find their Mike Elko. They're going to have to find that guy who is coming from a program that pretty good here, really good as an assistant. I mean, and I'm not saying we know the final everything as far as Elko's concerned, but if I told you right now, would you rather have Elko or Venables? I think you take.
I would definitely go Elko because he had success at Duke. So I mean,
yes,
he was proven as a head coach and was just as good of a defensive coordinator. So they bring similar qualities.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They got to find that. Because if you're just looking, even if you go, Sark was a head coach at one point, right? And so he had the track record there. He had Washington. He had it running in USC. So when you hire him, you can say, I hired a former head coach. He's been in the NFL. You can talk yourself into that. And at that time, what they paid Sark was low risk at that point.
But he was also 7-win Steve.
He was, but they didn't pay him. They didn't have to money whip him, right? They had to just give him a decent. Now he has success, and you're like, okay, here's the reward here. That's what I'm saying. You got to find that tier. You got to go into Ross and say, like, I can find this markdown, shirt, and then you're like, look at this. Like, it's brand new, but I got it on the low, right? It's a designer name. Like, you've got to find something like that as opposed to just hoping that, what they're doing. Because in this conference, Catch, it's going to be hard. And here's the thing. Here's the other thing, Catch. In this conference, Catch, before we go, most of these guys aren't going anywhere. Like, DeBoer got here, and unless DeBoer decides he's just bolted for the NFL at some point, he's here for a while. Kiffin, he's done the NFL thing. So this is home for him. Kirby Smart, this is where he's going to be. All these guys, Drinkwitz, none of these guys are probably leaving. Even Sark, I don't know. I don't see necessarily he's going to go back to the NFL. He's got to go in here. So you've got to compete against guys who got their program going, who ain't leaving anytime soon.
All right, guys, we got to roll. Steve Sarkisian's got a press conference in a little bit more than an hour. Thanks for the super chats. Guys, do us a solid. Like, comment, subscribe to the page. We do appreciate it. I do want to mention one more time, RogueShop.com, the sponsor of the Overreaction Monday show, one of our favorite partnerships that we have at Orange Bloods. RogueShop.com, use that promo code Orange Bloods for a discount. And know that they've got amazing product. I may have already engaged in some this morning. And by may, I mean definitely. You guys have a great rest of the day. We'll see you at noon for House Divided. Look, the Longhorns rolled Florida this weekend. Everybody's in a good mood, but Arkansas looms. We'll be talking about that all week live here.